How's it going, everyone? This is Dixon of the Ultimate Gamer. I'm logging on, and today I want to talk about my memories of Mortal Kombat. Since it's been the 30th anniversary of Mortal Kombat, it's been my 29th anniversary of Mortal Kombat. But since it's the 30th birthday of Mortal Kombat, I may as well go back into my memories of how I got into Mortal Kombat. Well, it all started during the 16-bit era, or shortly before my 16-bit era began in Christmas of 1993 when I got my Sega Genesis console. I seen the advertisement for both Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter 2 on both consoles, and I actually wanted to get into them because I was amazed with the graphics. I was pretty much getting a step up from the Game Boy because I actually wasn't into 8-bit for quite a while. So I wanted to go into the next step of the gaming. And I wanted to give fighting games a chance too. So, pretty much when I got my Genesis, after I got through the Sonic games, I decided to go into renting fighting games like Street Fighter 2 Special Championship Edition and the first Mortal Kombat game. And both of them are amazing in its own right. They're both different, but they're also both of the biggest competitors in tournament fighting game history. Even though Street Fighter started the whole trend, but Mortal Kombat pretty much capitalized on something better. I had a difficult time getting into Mortal Kombat, because practically my parents objected me of letting me get into the game at the time since it was violent and being one of the violent games on the news. Even though the console ports was censored, and they kind of okayed with that though, it was that they were actually censored. Well, the Genesis version was censored until you used the blood code ABACABB. Even though it's not as gruesome as the arcade version, but it's still pretty gruesome if you have the blood code in. The Super Nintendo version, on the other hand, is just completely censored. And you know how Nintendo were at the time with the family-friendly thing and censoring their ports of violent games that were from another system? You know how they were at the time. Well, sometimes they still are, but something like that. However, the Entertainment System Rating Board came a year later after the first game and the second, and a few months after the console ports of the second game. However, the Sega always had its own rating system, like GA or MA13 or MA17. The first Mortal Kombat game was rated MA13 because, as default, it's censored. But when you're using the blood code, it's violent. Between the two Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat game, I would have to say Mortal Kombat game is the one I love the most. One thing I dislike about Street Fighter 2, for the most part, is they didn't release sequels after the second one. They just keep updating the Street Fighter 2 game again. I mean, one or two updates is good enough. The third one wasn't released until years later. But however, the Mortal Kombat franchise continued with the sequel the following year. So, you know what I mean. On the Sega Genesis, there was also another fighting game that actually pretty much borrows elements from both Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, and that was Eternal Champions, a total underrated gem. Even though that one has its flaws, but I actually enjoyed the shit out of that game too. I also enjoyed the shit out of the Sega CD version of that game, Challenge from the Dark Side, which that one's even more gruesome. Speaking of Sega CD, the Sega CD version of Mortal Kombat 3 is practically the best console port. And that one got an MA17 rating because that one doesn't need a blood code because it was already in it. And that one was more closer to the arcade. Well, it has the same graphical style as the Genesis version, but other than that, it has the same sound as the arcade version. Plus, what's really awesome is you can also listen to the soundtrack off a CD player. Yep, that game has a playback audio. But the biggest drawback about the Sega CD version of Mortal Kombat is that when I had the Model 1. I actually bought the Sega CD version of Mortal Kombat, and it doesn't run on the hardware I had. No matter, and I even tried other copies. I even tried to get other copies of it, and it didn't work. I exchanged it for another copy at the time, and it didn't work. And about a few years later, I got in a different game, and that didn't work either. It's just that the Model 1 Sega CD that I had a compatibility issue with Mortal Kombat on the Sega CD. It's not just one copy, it's just any copy of the game in general. Years later, I got a Model 2 Sega CD, and I tried Mortal Kombat on that one. That one works awesomely. So I finally got a chance to play that one when I got the Model 2 Sega CD add-on. Above all, when it comes to console ports of the first Mortal Kombat game, I say that the Sega CD is the best one to go for. But I also like the 16-bit consoles, regardless of how it was butchered or censored. And the portables on Game Boy or Game Gear is a little different story, but still interesting. Might be looking back into those though too. Practically the closest port to the arcade would practically be the MS-DOS version of the first game, as well as the sequels, which are actually available on goodoldgames.com, by the way. And I do own all those ones. And pretty much after I got into the first Mortal Kombat game, I started going into the arcades to play Mortal Kombat 2 whenever I get a chance. I spend 50 cents each game. Even when I get my ass kicked, I still keep coming back for more. Because I always like to see someone pull off a fatality if I can't. And Mortal Kombat 2 was actually got much more improvements in that one. More characters. And probably my favorite character in Mortal Kombat 2 would have to be Katana. Because I like her moves. Her Kiss of Death fatality is even much better than Sonya's Kiss of Death. Even though I like Sonya's Kiss of Death as well too. But I like Katana's, how she kisses them until they blow up. Boom! And when it comes to the first game, my favorite, I think my favorite characters between Scorpion and Sub-Zero, I actually like them both. I like Scorpion's "Get over here." That's what got me into that one. That's what my favorite move was in the game at the time. I like Sub-Zero's ice ball move, but I like his fatality with the spinal cord rip. That was pretty gruesome. That's pretty much was my favorite. That was definitely my favorite one. My favorite move and favorite fatality in the first game. I like all the other ones, even though Liu Kang has the weakest one, which was a 360 uppercut. I guess his philosophy is showing his opponent mercy, and that's pretty much the closest thing of mercy as he can get. However, Mortal Kombat 2 is actually more gruesome, and I think, and when it comes to getting to the console ports around '94, this is where things make the change for the better. Of course, they couldn't censor anything out of it this time. I don't think it's possible they could, and I think Super Nintendo learned a lesson from the console port from the first game that boosted up more sales on the Super Nintendo version. And obviously the Super Nintendo version got the upper hand this time over the Genesis. Even though I did enjoy playing the Genesis version too, and I still look back on that one. And that one had an MA-17 sticker on it. MA-17 label, since it can't be edited out. And the Super Nintendo box version had a warning on there had an age warning on there. And that was a month before the Entertainment System rating boards came for third parties. So that's pretty much something new. Mortal Kombat was also one of the games that helped pioneer the entertainment system rating boards to begin with during that Senate hearing the following year, with other games like Night Trap or Lethal Enforcers, and etc. And 32X also had a Mortal Kombat 2 port. I'm not sure what I remember about that port the most, but that might be closer to the arcade. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure what to make of the 32X version. But however, I did got the Super Nintendo for my birthday in '95, and I actually decided to trade some of the Genesis games in to get some Super Nintendo games, including for Mortal Kombat 2 on the Super Nintendo. And that version was definitely the better one this time. And in between that time, I was giving Mortal Kombat 3 arcade the same treatment. But for home console, I gave the third Mortal Kombat game, I gave the Super Nintendo the treatment for the third Mortal Kombat game. And once again, that one's actually superior. That one's more closer to the arcade than the Genesis version. Even though the PlayStation launched that year, and but the PlayStation launched that year, and Mortal Kombat 3 came out on the PlayStation. That was actually the closest one to the arcade. But during that time, they were like giving a Street Fighter 2 treatment for that game by making Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, which brought back some of the absent characters from the previous games. And then they released them on the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, which were the last Mortal Kombat games to be released on the consoles. Then they updated it exclusively on the home consoles by calling it Mortal Kombat Trilogy, which has every single character, including the boss characters, for the CD-ROM consoles. The Super Nintendo version of Mortal Kombat Trilogy was the weakest one of them all, but when I want to play Mortal Kombat 3 in the arcades, I play the Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. And if I want to play Mortal Kombat 3 on the consoles, I go with Mortal Kombat Trilogy. But Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 on the 16-bit consoles are the ones I look back into the most, along with other ports of those two. However, after Mortal Kombat 3, I did lose interest in this franchise for a while, because I was already getting tired of fighting games. Because I want to get it, because I actually got in '96 birthday, I got into PlayStation 3, and I decided to get into other games like Resident Evil and the console ports of Doom. So, pretty much fighting games were kind of getting a little tiresome for me at the time. And I didn't get back into Mortal Kombat until Mortal Kombat Deception in 2004. Well, first of all, before that, I actually was getting into Midway Arcade Treasures compilations. The first compilation on the Xbox and the second one on the Xbox, which are both available on PlayStation 2 and GameCube. The second compilation had Mortal Kombat 2 and 3, which were the arcade ports. I didn't know why at the time they didn't have the first Mortal Kombat game on that compilation, but they did have a trailer for Mortal Kombat Deception. On what they had to offer in Mortal Kombat Deception was a conquest mode where it feels like you're on a journey going through realms and like talking to people, doing missions, collecting artifacts. It feels more like an RPG going on a conquest in that game. Plus, there's also the fighting. There's also the tournament as well too, as well as adding a chess combat and a puzzle combat. They have a lot of variety in Deception. Gives me an idea what I've been missing out time to time. And Well, that pretty much got me back into the Mortal Kombat franchise. I bought the Deception on the original Xbox, the collector's edition of it that features a bonus disc that has the playable version of Mortal Kombat 1, well, the arcade version, and that was a pretty smooth deal. I played the shit out of that one, and I enjoyed it. And I wish they would make another game like that. Definitely one of the best Mortal Kombat games I ever played. Now, the one before that, Deadly Alliance, was okay. I started trying to give that one a try to see what I missed out on. But it's not really worth getting much back into. The Shaolin Monks game, which was the third spin-off in the series, came out a following year later. I mean, it was definitely a big improvement over Mythologies and Special Forces from the last generation. I just wish they'd do a remaster version of that one and practically do fixed versions of the previous two. And then the sequel to Deception, Armageddon, which you can, just like Mortal Kombat Trilogy, you can play every single character in that game in Armageddon. Armageddon added new stuff in that one too, and they brought back some of the old levels that like they did in Deception. And they added like a new conquest mode where it kind of feels more like a beat 'em up than it is a role-playing kind of like game, traveling from realm to realm, which is pretty cool. But I actually like the Deception one better. They added this instead, but they didn't add the puzzle combat fighter in this one. But they didn't add the puzzle combat or the chess combat this time, which is a bummer. But they did added a new Mortal Kombat race, kind of like a Mortal Kombat racing, death racing game, kind of like. It's kind of like a cute mini game, kind of like a rip off to Mario Kart or something. And the puzzle combat was pretty much a rip off to Puzzle Fighter. That was from Deception. In Armageddon, also they added this creative combat fighter, which is really cool idea. Even though it wasn't perfect, you can only create one or two fighters, which is a bummer. But it was something new at the time. I wish they would have actually kept that in the future games and made it and did some improvements for it. And the cool thing about it is they added every single character in Mortal Kombat from day one to current at the time. But there are a few drawbacks about Armageddon. Is that the graphics have been recycled compared to Deception, and the cool fatalities they had in the previous games were gone. They just added this new custom fatality thing, which was pretty weak. That was pretty much the downfall of that one. I mean, above all, Armageddon was still good, but it's not as good as Deception. And then they did the first crossover. Then Midway did the first crossover of Mortal Kombat with DC Universe, which was butchered down to a T rating. Well, I understand for something like that. I still enjoyed that one pretty well. Joker's funny. Wonder Woman's pretty hot to look at, and as well as other female characters, Sonya, Katana, and Catwoman. Yeah, and all the characters in that one were pretty cool. Just kind of hard to pull off a fatality or heroic brutality. And the campaigns for both of them were pretty cool. Yeah, and of course, Warner Brothers also bought the rights since Midway went under, and then they did Then they did a reboot of Mortal Kombat in 2011 for the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and later for PS Vita and PC. Yeah, it was basically a reboot of the whole trilogy, of the first trilogy. They went back to the 2D routes. And it was pretty amazing. The fatalities were pretty cool. It's really good seeing the old characters get back together, and and the female characters were pretty sexy to look at in that one, and pretty fun to play. It's also considered as they also call it the ninth entry as well too, because the sequels were known as X for 10 and 11 for 11th. Well, anyway, the ninth one, or the reboot, whatever you want to call it, they actually had Freddy Krueger as a DLC, or as part of the complete edition, which is pretty nice. It's kind of the reason why the game's off the digital distribution marketplace, is because Warner Brothers doesn't have the licensing to Freddy or something. Of course, if you're a PlayStation owner, you can play as Kratos exclusively, which is really badass. It's too bad Microsoft couldn't actually have like Marcus Phoenix or Master Chief as a playable character. Well, whatever. The reboot of Mortal Kombat was definitely one of my favorite reboots of all time. It's definitely one of my favorite Mortal Kombat games. Now, the sequels, Mortal Kombat X and Mortal Kombat 11, are still good. But the problem is, with the female characters, they started desexualizing them in Mortal Kombat X, which is pretty pussified to me. But however, it's really cool that they actually got Jason Voorhees and Leatherface and Alien and Predator as a purchasable DLC. And those characters are pretty fun to use in that game. And some new characters they introduced, like the next generation of some of the other characters, was kind of a nice thing they added. Now, Mortal Kombat 12, I still like that one really well, but the problem is political correctness got involved with that one, and they desexualize the female characters even more, which makes it even more pussified. And they ruined Jack's ending, and they took Johnny Cage's okay thing out because they all thought it was like a white supremacist symbol. What the fuck? Fucking idiots. Censorship, political correctness or wokeness is a bigger sin than game mechanic flaws. In my opinion. I mean, some of the failures for like console ports of Mortal Kombat, or failure Mortal Kombat ports of games, were more forgivable than any of the woke stuff being added into it. But still, Mortal Kombat 11 did bring a lot of things awesome in that game, despite its wokeness shit and its microtransaction shit, loot boxes and crap like that. Fuck that. Well, anyway, I really wish that since it's the 30th anniversary, that Mortal Kombat gave the same treatment for all of its games in one compilation like Street Fighter did for their 30th anniversary. It's no excuse for that. I mean, there's no excuse not to. Oh yeah, there's something I forgot to mention. The movies. I saw the first movie in 95 was good. The second one, and Annihilation, some people like it, some people don't. I say it's okay. I haven't seen any of the others after that, and I don't care, because I'm not into the video game adaptation movies, especially these days anymore, because they usually tend to flop. Sometimes they can pull it off if they get something right, but majority of the time they don't. Well, anyway, Mortal Kombat franchise will always be my favorite fighting game franchise of all time. I just wish, hopefully, if they do make another Mortal Kombat game, they don't desexualize the female characters. They don't put any of the woke bullshit into it. Because that's not what Mortal Kombat was from day one. They used to be against censorship. They used to have balls to fight against censorship. and continue to make the games better. Now, there are a lot more to my memories of Mortal Kombat. It's just that it's the 30th anniversary time. I just thought I had to drag most of the memories that I remembered by heart and that I actually have on notes in my mind instead of having notes written down. But if I ever get to reviewing any of the games, it will also jog my memory, and I will also have a scripted review of it. So it'll actually bring more to my memories than what I already explained. Even though if I actually do have it all of memory by heart, it will take forever for me to explain, and I'm going to get this little short as possible. Well, thank you all very much for understanding that, by the way. Well, anyway, that's pretty much all I got to say about my 30th anniversary of Mortal Kombat. It's pretty unscripted, and pretty sure I left a few things out of it, though, because I'm kind of putting up with a cold right now, and I'm a little exhausted. Thank you all very much for watching and listening. This is Dixon of the Ultimate Gamer. I'm logging off.